Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Second Evaluation Center Virtual Discussion and Knowledge Exchange. I'm Nina Dellas Alas, Senior Research Associate at MN Associates, Inc. My colleague, Shelley Golson-Mickens, and I will co-facilitate today's session. Today's presenters are Kavita Mittapalli, our CEO and co-founder of MNA, and Brandon J. Mitchell, who is the Principal Investigator of a Track 1 STEM project at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. The project is named Increasing the Persistence of STEM Majors Through Nano Science-Themed Activities that Support Academic, Professional, and Personal Engagement and Development. Wow. Rounding out today's discussion team are our AAAS colleagues, Tara King, Jamila Blake, and Rachel Stivers. Next slide. Today's session is designed to actively engage you to interact with one another and identify common strategies and concerns based on your S-STEM track and institution types. We hope this session also helps identify areas for future discussions, including presenters, experts from the field, and resources. Next slide. We want to make this session engaging with the fewest distractions. So we ask for your help by observing the virtual meeting etiquette that you see on your screen. We have optimized communication for the whole group by enabling the chat feature, and that's going to be our main source of communication, and also making closed caption available. Please rename yourself as directed because this also helps us know one another. Jamila, Rachel, or Tara can assist you if you run into any technical issues while we're on this call. Today's whole group presentation and discussion will be recorded. The slides are actually posted now, and later on today we'll have the recording to follow. We'll also compile a summary of today's session as a resource, and the summary will focus on the Q&A. Now to you, Shelley.
All right, welcome everyone. So I'm going to go over the agenda and how things are going to go for this session. I do want to say that we're going to follow a fishbowl discussion in which Nina and I are going to ask our presenters 3 guiding questions about their PI and evaluator working relationship. And after which we will open it up for you via the Q&A chat. And we're going to end with a survey. So there'll be 15 minutes reserved at the end of today's session for any additional evaluation TA and questions. So of course, we'll start off with introduction and session objectives, and then we'll go through the effective practices and strategies in the PI evaluator engagement and collaboration. And then we'll end with the question session. Before we begin, we want to thank Brandon and Kavita for sharing their experiences and how they work together. This gives us an opportunity to learn from them, but this is also an opportunity for us to learn from each other. Now, we acknowledge that programs that engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and issues related to that are challenging. So we want to show appreciation to everyone for joining us in this conversation, but also joining with openness and with humility. We are recording this session to help spread promising practices and strategies and to support all of us engaged in this very important work, particularly STEM-oriented, low-income supporting work and helping students to succeed in post-secondary education and STEM-related careers. Next slide, please. All right, so to start, we want to take a moment to find out who's with us today. So when you get a chance, we would like for you to complete the poll. You will go ahead and drop that poll and let us know what your role in S-STEM is, what your role is in your project, what track your project is on. If you currently have a grant, and if you don't, select N/A. We also want to know which track is your S-STEM project in, meaning planning, track 1, track 2. We want to know if you are, what your institution type is, and if your institution is a minority serving institution. All right.
For those who are putting other, can you put in the chat what that might be?
Yeah, interesting things coming through here.
Give it a few more seconds. We have 82% participation right now.
And 86.
See grant writers. All right.
Guys, you got some evaluators joining us.
Okay. Great.
Awesome. All right.
All right, I'll share the results.
Well, thank you everyone for your time today. We're looking forward to this very exciting discussion, and I'm going to pass it over to Nina. Next slide, please.
Next slide. Sorry. Is this off? So let's see here. There. So in October 2022, the American Association for the Advancement of Science was awarded a National Science Foundation grant through a competitive proposal process to establish the S-STEM Resource and Evaluation Center, or REC for short. The REC aims to create a greater support infrastructure, building community, coordinate work, and synthesize findings across the over 600 active NSF S-STEM awards. The REC promotes the exchange of ideas, resources, opportunities, and knowledge about effective strategies and practices to increase the number of talented, low-income students who obtain STEM degrees and then enter the STEM workforce. The REC supports the capacity building of current and prospective S-STEM grant awardees, S-STEM scholars, and the overarching NSF S-STEM portfolio. So AAAS, as you can see here, collaborates with 4 other partner organizations that contribute to the key aspect of the REC's work. We at MNA provide evaluation technical assistance and support current as well as prospective S-STEM awardees. So you'll probably see us again when you start talking about the proposal process in a few months. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 5 key activities of the REC. Our virtual event today falls under the REC's Evaluation Technical Assistance Suite. And then working with us at MNA, the REC provides events and resources for, as I said, current and prospective S-STEM awardees in the area of project evaluation, and something that I think is becoming more and more crucial, the generation of knowledge. So this exercise that we're having, that's part of that generation of knowledge. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if you have additional questions regarding, as I said, the generation of knowledge, research, and evaluation plans, please use the link that you see before you or the QR code to access and complete the evaluation TA request form. And as you can see, that it's also dropped into your chat. Next slide, please. And as part of this, we're also building up a resource portfolio, and you can also locate them in our website. And if you go into the evaluation research resource section of the S-STEM REC website, I'm going to go see a web page there and click on resources. And then if you use one of those filters that you see over there to your right and it's circled in red, you select evaluation research resources, there you'll find us. And as I said, we're going to be posting a lot of materials, including this one that's related to this session. So you'll see it before you there. So today's session is a direct result from the responses to the Scholars Meeting survey. Participants ranked various supports and engagements and collaboration strategies with external evaluation receiving the highest priority. And you can see the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th other priorities. And we hope that in subsequent chats just like these, we'll be able to highlight those topics. Next slide, please. So, to address today's topic of engagement and collaboration strategy with external evaluators, we're going to focus on our S-STEM project at Westchester University. Our presenters will introduce themselves and the S-STEM work that they're engaged in, starting with Brandon Mitchell. So, Brandon, take it away.
Does help if I'm not muted. Hello, everybody. Is there another slide after this one? Or am I just talking? There we go. Yeah, so hello, everybody. So I am Brandon Mitchell. I'm a physics professor and the PI on the S-STEM program at Westchester. And one of our main ideas when we were doing our S-STEM program was to try to do a cohort about the intersection of the different science disciplines. And so we decided to use nanoscience as that kind of theme, both in kind of broader technology, but also kind of the health industry. So because nanotechnology deals with biology and chemistry and math and physics. And so it was a good way of having the students kind of connected, even though they were in different majors. We provide scholarships right now to 18 full-time students, 2 annual cohorts. These are the different majors that they have. And some of the activities that we've been doing, we made sure to have a STEM-oriented summer camp, especially during COVID. This seemed to be important because of some of the math skills that were not fully developed as they had been in the past. So this gave us 3 weeks to kind of bump up their math skills before heading into a STEM discipline. And then we also have the opportunities for summer research or industry internships for 2 of their years after their second year and after their third year. And then beyond that, we have a career planning and graduate fellowship writing workshops. So every component of our program is to get them from high school ready for undergraduate, kind of keep them involved in their majors with the summer researchships and internship programs, and then heading out into supporting them into whether they want to do graduate school or go to industry. For our program, in terms of recruitment, the relationship building has been a huge part of, and I mean that in regards to the community, relationship building has been huge for our recruitment, which I would say has been widely successful because we were able to partner with a lot of local high schools, and we don't just do recruitment. We actually developed an entire outreach committee where we go to the various schools and we do grades 7 through 10 outreach and workshops. And this also then gets us kind of access to some of the students for our recruitment pool. Next slide, please. And so our current demographics right now, our biggest idea is that we went to schools in our local area that primarily focused on, they had free lunches, they had a diverse makeup of students, and it was simply so that we could have our 18 scholars be as representative of the community as we could make them. Westchester, although it's a state school and it does a pretty good job in STEM, the demographics are not reflective of our local community, and so we wanted to make sure that we had an applicant pool that was more reflective of that. And we've been pretty successful in recruiting diverse group of majors. We have 70% female and 70% that are Black, Hispanic, or other student of color. What do we got? Yep. Our retention so far has been, it was really good up until like a week ago, but still about 56% for year 1 and 78% for year 2. But what I'll say is we've implemented a process where we can basically replace a scholar almost within a week if one of the scholars does lose, because we have a list of eligible scholars that we're just kind of waiting and hoping we can give scholarships to. Next. And then this is just kind of an overview of the workshops we do. Science of Learning is one of our favorite workshops for the students, which is basically human memory. Interdisciplinary, yeah, clean energy and interdisciplinary. It's really good when you could, they enjoy the interdisciplinary. We've actually had STEM, I just want to respond to a chat that I got. We've actually had some of our STEM majors switch their major because they found out that they wanted to do biology, but they were more interested in chemistry or something along those lines. So it's been interesting to have them work together in the cross-disciplinary fashion and see how they actually realize how their interests change. Science of Learning workshop is human memory and how memories are stored. So we try to really get at good, effective study strategies. We do imposter syndrome workshops. We do a Banish the Burnout workshop, which I actually hosted because I was a certified yoga teacher. And so we did kind of presence exercises, some yoga, some breathing exercises, really getting at what burnout looks like and the importance of rest and self-care, which a lot of our students, they like to stay up to like 3 in the morning and get 4 hours of sleep, which isn't always the best. We do resume workshops, and then Friendsgiving is actually coming up around the corner again. And that is, we try to get the cohorts together and just for fun and to just talk about, you know, what's going on in their lives every once in a while. And Friendsgiving is one of the ones that we do for that. I'll leave it to Kavita.
Thanks, Brandon. So first off, well, Brandon has made my job as the evaluator very easy. The reason being that he pretty much does everything and I don't have to check in and ask, hey, what's going on? What's going on? So suffices to say, hi everyone, I'm Kavita Mittapalli. I am the evaluator on several of the S-STEM grants. And I'm so happy to see some of the PIs of some of the other grants here. So hi everyone. And I founded M&A in 2004 as a graduate student, and my background is bachelor's in agricultural sciences, MA in applied sociology, and a PhD in research design and methodology. So when I was getting my bachelor's in agricultural sciences, I was wondering what would I do with that degree. It's all coming together now after 50 years. So that's nice. At M&A, I lead a team of 7 evaluators and a statistician, and you've met Nina and Shelley, and we have a few others working in the background. To date, we have evaluated 10 S-STEM grants in tracks 1 through 3, and also a STEM hub, and we're providing evaluation to several grantees, pretty much all the grantees as part of the REC. So that's the background that M&A has and brings to S-STEM grants.
To start us off, we have a few guiding questions and then turn it over to Brandon and Kavita to respond. So the first question is this: how did you establish your PI-Evaluator working relationship? Did you work together before? And did you work on the proposal together?
Kavita, are we telling the truth on this one, or? Yeah.
Let's do it, Brandon.
But yeah, so effectively, I mean, when it came down, I'm sure many of you that have been PIs, that are PIs now, or that are submitting the PI, submitting a grant, you may not get it on your first try. You may have to do a second try, you know, take to consider, as with any NSF grant. And so what happened, this one is my university submitted one, but the PI on that particular time was very discouraged by the feedback and didn't want to do it anymore. So we weren't going to resubmit. And then I told our vice provost for sponsored research, like, give me the feedback and let me take over and let me take a look at it. And so we revamped it and gave it this nanoscience theme, and I added on a co-PI that was education-based, and it went well. The problem was I assumed that Kavita had been contacted by the vice provost for sponsored research, and she hadn't been. So what it came down to when our grant was funded, it was like, oh, hey, Kavita, you ready to work on this? And it was like, wait, who are you? And so we didn't actually meet. We met each other by complete surprise as we were both funded on a grant. She thought that it wasn't going anywhere and hadn't been resubmitted, and I didn't know she hadn't been told anything. Since then, I've done everything in my power to make sure she's fully aware of everything going on. But yes, no, that is our relationship, very kind of surprise relationship.
So just to add to that, Brandon, so the lesson learned here is engage with the evaluator early and often. have them in the pre-award process, right? And then keep them informed so that the evaluator is not chasing the PI and the co-PIs. Have you been funded? Have you been funded? Have you been funded? So that really shouldn't be our job. So keep us posted and let us know how we can help. And as Brandon mentioned, if I had known that he and his team had received the clarification questions, we actually jump in and we actually help in those aspects as well. Since we didn't know that the proposal actually had reached that section, we thought, well, moving on. So let's look for something else. So establishing a relationship with the evaluator is primary, and it should be done early and often.
Yeah, and I just want to put in one other thing for anybody who's this is their first. That was my first grant that was accepted. My other 4 submissions had all been lovely rejected, not for S-STEM but for other NSF grants. And so this is the first time I was a PI. And so in ignorance, you do sometimes forget those things, but definitely make sure you are in communication with your external evaluator as much as possible.
So post-award, just adding to the guiding question 1, is that post-award, we are in very constant communication through emails, phone calls, Zoom meetings. So Brandon makes sure that the whole team, his co-PIs, the researchers. So this is one of those tracks where there is a social science researcher and I'm the evaluator. M&A is the evaluator. So we often make sure that we are not conflating our work, meaning that what the researcher is doing is separate from the evaluator. However, we do collaborate in the sense that the researcher sometimes asks us, are there any evaluative type of questions that they could include in their focus groups? So that has been very collaborative. It has been very, very successful as well. Yes, Dave, we agree. The other thing that we've also learned is Brandon also makes sure that we are added into the calendar of events, especially the summer activities. They become extremely hectic. There's campus visits and many of the other programs also kind of overlap. So he makes sure that I'm invited to some of those events. In the past 2 years, I have had the opportunity to observe some of the math clubs and some of the focus groups virtually. So usually I'm there as a participant observer, although I'm not collecting active data on the participants because the track was such that there was a separate social science researcher. I do get a glimpse of what the researchers are doing and how I can help and assist and be there for them as needed. Again, as Brandon said, communication is key. And another thing I wanted to note is that, as you know, the evaluators are supposed to complete an evaluation report at the end, and that report goes along with the annual report. So typically, I send my report a few weeks ahead of time, if I'm able to, and Brandon very carefully looks at the lessons learned and recommendations, and he just doesn't leave them as such. He often has a response, or he also provides feedback back to me saying that this is a great recommendation, but it may not be doable under our university's pretext. And at the same time, he also provides some responses to the recommendations saying that this is a great idea. Let's put it this way. Let's try it this way and see if it works or not. So Brandon, this might be a question for you. If you'd like to take a question, you're on mute.
Really got to get myself off of mute here. So I have we got one. I don't know if you want to start with the one by Matthew Swenson. We got one from like My College is Developing an S-STEM grant. Do you want me to tackle that one now? Do we?
Or should we wait? Are we waiting for the questions until the end, Nina? Sorry.
Yes, we are, but sometimes some of these might be better responded. So if you can do it quickly, otherwise we'll just move on to some of the other guiding questions. So thank you. So go ahead, Brandon, if you want to, if it's a short response to.
So I'll do the quick one that was at 2:16, and then we can wait on the one that was just recently done. You can answer it, but the first one I can tell you. So there's a couple of things when you're doing an interdisciplinary theme, and my first suggestion to you is contact the program director. There's been a little bit of a different shift, and I can explain why quickly. About you have to be very careful when you're doing the interdisciplinary theme in terms of how you are going to ensure, if you're doing like a 4-year S-STEM grant, like sometimes what people will do is they'll have them come in from community college and just do 2 years at the institution, or it might only be funded for the first 2 years or the last 2 years. If you're planning on taking a cohort all the way through from the beginning to end, the problem with having interdisciplinary like we have it right now, and we're already starting to see it, is that like for instance, biology and geology and chemistry, physics start to diverge right around junior year to the point where they're no longer really in classes anymore. And so when we're applying for a track 3 proposal now, we actually got a planning grant that was recently funded. That was some of the concerns that came up with us doing a track 3 interdisciplinary, was concerns over how you're going to keep the students together throughout everything as they start to diverge academically. So if you're going to do interdisciplinary and you want to do that, one of the things we did do, that's the pitfall. The advantages of it, like I said, were that they do kind of like find that they liked biochemistry more than they liked biology, or they liked engineering better than they liked physics or something like that. So it really, an 18-year-old, especially these low-income first-generation students, they don't always know what they don't know. And so they don't know enough about some of these careers, and the interdisciplinary really allows them to see the different ways in which they could approach the topic that they're interested in. So maybe they like clean energy or they like something, but they don't really know whether it's the physics of it or the chemistry. The other thing that I'll say is it is fun to have an interdisciplinary cohort where you can we have 2 courses that we offer. One is the tools of nanoscience, and the other one is kind of like a theory of nanoscience, but really at like a general level. And that gets all the students together in a cohort for one class. And that's really good to make sure they're always together, even if in their other classes they've diverged.
Thank you for taking that, Brandon. I think this is a good time for us to move into guiding question 2, because you've already kind of started talking about this a little bit. But what policies, procedures, and processes set the groundwork for you, for how you, operationalize the program and concurrent implementation of the evaluation?
You want me to start on that one, Kavita? All right. I mean, in terms of the groundwork for the program, again, as anybody who's a PI now knows, and anybody who's going to be planning this, you'll find out, is it's very, very difficult to know if you're ready for one of these, especially if you jump into a track 2 like we did. I know of other people that jumped right into a track 3. There is also a track 1. And so if you're thinking to yourself, maybe my institution isn't quite ready for a track 2, you might want to try a track 1. In retrospect, and it is recorded, right? Yeah. We probably should have done a track 1 because in terms of policies, procedures, and processes for the groundwork, they just weren't there. We kind of assumed they would be. And then when we actually started going to talk to, oh, we need housing, we need meal plans, we need summer stuff, we need this, suddenly you find out that, what are you talking about? We don't do that. Or, we had a policy with housing. We ended up in a and Kavita knows about this. We had a housing crisis where they were letting in way too many students for who knows what reason. And they didn't actually have enough on-campus housing for all the students. So they were putting them into a lottery system. And it didn't really matter. It was a completely benign lottery system that didn't take into consideration anything, where they lived, income status, disability. And so it was just a pure lottery system. And so a lot of my students couldn't get housing that were in the S-STEM. Well, if they can't get housing, we live in an extremely expensive area of Pennsylvania. And so the average apartment is $2,400, $2,500 a month. And you just simply can't, it suddenly becomes unaffordable for these students. And so we worked with them to help our students, which was fine for our students, but at the same time, then it makes you start to feel bad for, like, what about all the students that, we couldn't help? So I would say, I wish there were policies and procedures that we had for groundwork. Instead, what I would say is we actually developed policies after a very, very intense year 1. So I would recommend that everyone, it's very easy on and I've been on panels for S-STEM, but I've also taught to PIs on those S-STEMs. not those specific ones, but just other S-STEMs. And there seems to be a disconnect between how well people think their institution's prepared for an N-STEM versus how well they are. It's like, well, we're going to work with the admissions department, and we're going to work with the housing, and we're going to work with this. I see that. And then when you talk to the PIs, like, oh, the admissions wouldn't do this, or this. And I found the same thing where you email admissions and say, hey, we're doing a grant program. Will you help us? And they're like, of course we will. And then you come to them and you're like, hey, we got the money. We need you to do this, this, and this. Like, we don't do any of that stuff. And so there's this disconnect between what you think is going to happen and what actually happens. So that's the best I could say. And then in terms of the evaluation, again, this was all kind of, a lot of things were going wrong. Kavita, what's worked in your other S-STEMs? That's where the evaluator can be so helpful on your first S-STEM is, all right, we're in year one and things are not going to plan. Where have you seen this in other S-STEMs? What is your advice? So they're evaluating your program, but the evaluator isn't your enemy. They're not on the outside trying to tell the NSF what a bad job you're doing, or, it's their job to evaluate the program, but they should want you to be successful. And offer advice where they can. And I know Kavita does that with us quite a bit.
And Brandon, I shouldn't be talking about the budgetary issues with the evaluator and getting paid, right? Okay, I'm going to zip it, right? So the things that
the evaluator gets paid in a timely manner.
Just to add what Brandon said is that the programmatic changes implementation directly affects evaluation, right? So we are here to serve the scholars. If scholars are not happy, they will let you know. So those things were evident in the surveys. They were evident in the interviews and the focus groups. So we noted those, and those were, aptly provided or, shared with Brandon, who was totally aware of this. But the question here was, the way I think I was helping Brandon is also pulling information and knowledge from some of the other S-STEMs. Although they didn't have as many crucial issues in the first year, especially as relates to housing issues or any others, but there were similar non-academic problems in some of the other NSF S-STEM grants that we were evaluating. And there were some resources that I was able to share with Brandon, and he was very gracious, and he was honestly very happy to learn that it's not only his program and it's not his fault, right? So that's why I think the experience of the evaluators really is helpful. We bring in the perspective from some of the other shared work that we have been doing, and we also make connections with other PIs and co-PIs. So again, just to kind of round this off, is that anything that happens to the program, to the grant, to the scholars affects directly the way we are implementing our evaluation issues on the ground, how that really defines our evaluation questions formatively as well as summatively, our outputs in terms of how are the numbers shifting? Are we seeing any retention issues as a result? Are we seeing some really disengagement because the scholars are struggling to find housing? So maybe they are disengaged as a result of this. So these are some of the things that we also set up in terms of the early alerts and inform Brandon and his team immediately.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I do have a question, a follow-up question for you both, and it's really ultimately the takeaways. Like, what would be ideal for the evaluator PI relationship? To what kind of policies and procedures would really help the evaluator PI relationship to be more effective, especially if you're coming in the middle? How do we mitigate those challenges?
I wonder, do you mean policies, procedures, and processes in terms of how I operate with Kavita, or how I operate with the S-STEM as a whole?
I think it's a blurred line between the two in some cases. So maybe the blurred line between the two.
For me, with Kavita, I would say, like, again, it speaks to how we met each other, right? I would actually say that because it was such a unconventional, kind of not the way you'd want to meet your evaluator moment with us, I took that as I really need to be diligent and make sure that she knows I'm all in. I'm not somebody who falls behind. And so we developed a relationship of policies and procedures post-award based upon a trust that we're going to meet at least once a month at the least, bi-weekly emails if possible, but always have like kind of a one-on-one. And if she can't make one of the meetings with the co-PIs, then sometimes me and her would just meet together, even if she couldn't make the times with the other one, so that there's a constant communication going on. That was, I think, one of the biggest things that we had, making sure that her evaluation got to me in time so that I could give the feedback. Like, it's not just like, oh, thank you for your evaluation that I need as part of my S-STEM because NSF requires it and I'm not going to look at it, but very much I need it ahead of time so that I'm writing my evaluation report. I can also put in lessons learned and get your perspective and vice versa. So that was good. And then as an overall S-STEM, especially for your first one, it seems like academics are the biggest problem, but I would hope that a lot of, perhaps other people may feel differently, but it'd be interesting to know, is I feel like a lot of the problems are non-academic. Like, these students are pretty strong academically, and they may need some tutoring and they may need some help here and there. But so many of the problems that I deal with these students, because of the fact that they're low income, come from that lifestyle. Do they have a job? How do you get them to stop having a job? Is it your place putting all these barriers in, making sure they have housing? If they get into trouble for whatever reason, there's all of these non-academic things, and making sure that you have buy-in from housing. And I don't know about other PIs. I'd love the financial aid office, just making sure that their financial aid packages are actually correct. I mean, I think, and Kavita knows this, every single semester, it's basically like, when am I going to get that first package and how many corrections am I going to have to make? Because it'll come to me like, this is what I have for your scholars. I'm like, okay, that's wrong. This person needs more over there. Why didn't you put in their housing? Where's this person's meal plan? And it's just like, how can you get 8 out of 20 financial aid packages incorrect? And what are you doing with the other 5,000 students that have these that I can't sit here and look at? So I would just, it's about getting those policies in place of what's your job as a PI, or if not a PI, a program manager, non-academically. I would say the non-academics were the biggest policies and processes I wish I had thought about beforehand. We spent way too much time as a professor thinking about the academics and the cohort building, and not as much about the actual like institutional implementation.
Thank you for sharing. Did you have any thoughts on that, Kavita? Anything to add before we move on?
Just to add, sometimes what happens is the PIs are so caught up, right, in trying to fix something that they forget to keep us in the loop. And then we hear about the problems or the gaps from someone else, and that becomes a big surprise and an issue, because we should be hearing all these firsthand from the PI, because they really are managing and steering the project. So Brandon has been extremely transparent in our meetings. It's very informal, and we just, speak our minds. And that's where even Brandon, I've had to stop Brandon and say that, hey, stop, Brandon, I think we need to do this. This is not working clearly. I know these are the problems. So what is the solution? So the whole team really pitches in, and this is one of the really good meetings that I look forward to on a monthly basis, where Brandon has his whole team together, including the social science researcher, because they are bringing in their own slice of learning. They are in the classroom. Some of them they are teaching, they have their students, and they actually understand the psyche of these scholars, comparing with some of the others who are not receiving the funding. So are there differences? Although the cohort size is small, but qualitatively, they are able to find a lot of information, and they're sharing that back with the team. And that really helps us inform and get to know what's really happening inside, looking from outside.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, let's move to that third question. How did the successes and challenges translate to articulating the broader impacts of the S-STEM project thus far?
On our end, when I look at the things that the S-STEM has done, both the successes and the challenges, in terms of the successes, what that did was it spawned, because of the S-STEM and the successes of our recruitment network, we actually launched an entire Center for STEM Inclusion, with a new outreach committee that is all the STEM departments. We got funding from our senator, and it was a government appropriation grant, which is going through the Department of Education to launch an entire outreach. And that just had to do it's not about recruitment, and that's where our partnerships that's where our partnerships with the schools, they understand that when it comes to the scholarship, I'm recruiting. But when it comes to the outreach, we're just there to interact with the students. And I think that the successes of interacting with such a broad base of students, because we have Westchester's weird because it's right next to Philly, but it's right next to the middle of nowhere. And like Lancaster, that's like very, very rural. And so we have different types of students, and we've gotten to know their different personalities. And we really wanted to go into the schools and try to help them, hearing all these background, like, oh, if only I had this in high school and blah, blah, blah. So the success of it and how well we know our scholars led to a whole outreach thing that's kind of gotten a little out of control, but it's been very successful. We've got a lot of school partners now. And then in terms of the challenges, one of the biggest things that I'm proud of with our grant is it changed out how our financial aid office does something. And it's a very small change, but it's a huge change, which is, sorry, Pennsylvania and some other states might have similar things. Pennsylvania has a state aid that it's kind of a sister to the Pell. And so if your student has Pell eligibility in Pennsylvania, there's a Pennsylvania higher education, 2 other A's. And basically what happens is they get it's like $4,500 in addition to the Pell. But what I found out was that a lot of the students who were eligible weren't taking it. So when we really take a look at your the financial aid package and be a little bit critical of what you get back from institutional research, because sometimes they may have a different way of answering your question. Because what we asked for was the average cost of attendance. And it was really weird how we got that, because it turned out that was not the average cost should they get all this funding. It was just how much people actually paid. And what we found out was that most of our students weren't getting the FIA. So we budgeted for $9,000 a year to cover all expenses at Westchester, but our average ends up being about maybe $6,000 because we make sure that all of our students have FIA. And so then what happened was, now our financial aid office, the second somebody's Pell eligible, it flags them to check and make sure that they put in their FIA paperwork and looks at their work study, so that we make sure that they're taking advantage of their work study, their FIA, and their Pell. And so over the last 2 years, the average cost of attendance for a Pell eligible student has gone down a few $1,000s because of the fact that even though 2 other things have gone up in price, because the funding, they're actually taking advantage of more of the funding that they were like they could apply to. So sometimes these first generation students just do not know what funding is available to them, and making that more streamlined was a huge success for the broader impacts for us.
Thank you. What's your response to that, Kavita? No?
Yep, he said it very well.
Yeah, I think that this question has been very well covered. These questions have been very well covered, but we do want to provide the audience an opportunity to ask questions as well.
So Dave posted something about the difference between the generation of knowledge aspect and evaluation, and that often gets conflated. So thanks, Dave, for reiterating that. So with Brandon's track, which was about, now we are into the 4th year, right, Brandon? Yeah, exactly. So at that time, there was a separation of a social science researcher. Yeah, in the previous solicitation, it was a requirement of an education or a social science researcher and a separate evaluator. That evaluator could be either in the same institution, but different department, or they could be an external evaluator like myself. But for the 2023 and 2024 tracks, the emphasis really is on the generation of knowledge, and that could actually come from the evaluator or the evaluation aspect. There are some institutions that have continued to use social science researchers within their institution, and that's totally fine. But the expectation is that there has to be a generation of knowledge, and a rigorous evaluation process as well. So more to come on this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say track 3 still requires that, but the track 2 no longer does.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you.
So we may want to go back to that question that Matthew Swenson from Green River College asked, and back in timestamp 224, and it's did, and in parens, and if so, how? Did you discuss publishing as one of the results of your S-STEM project? I've read many journal articles on S-STEM projects that seem to simply report that projects, activities, and results and leave it up to readers to infer lessons learned or how to apply them to their own colleges. Can external evaluators guide, support PIs and co-PIs on what constitutes meaningful publication?
So the short answer is yes, but also it depends, right? For in Brandon's case, the social science researchers are very, very, they are extremely professional and they are in the field and they know where exactly to publish. So I haven't had to guide them as to, hey, look into this publication, or you have these really great focus group results, you should go and publish here. However, as evaluator, I've had the opportunity, and I'm actually happy to report that I've had PIs who are very open to sort of publish or disseminate information at different places. See, everybody doesn't have the time or the resources or the expertise necessarily to publish into a peer-reviewed journal, because it really, really takes time. And you are busy running the program, you are busy doing the other stuff, so you really don't have the time to publish. However, I've encouraged the PIs and co-PIs or whoever is interested to share their studies in a blog form. They could also share them in a poster form. They could always do a session in the PI meetings, which happens every other year. So there are different ways of where they can actually share. And now that we have the REC, there are monthly chats. There are a QEM, one of our partners, is actively seeking participants, PIs, co-PIs, researchers, where they really want all of you to come share, learn from each other. So there are different avenues. And I would say go for it. Explore these opportunities, because you never know, you might actually find a collaborator who would be willing to actually write or co-write and co-publish.
What I would like to add up, the 2 things I want to add there, because this is a great question. Particularly, I would say it's not even the where to publish, but the idea of report the projects. I want to highlight the simply report the project activities and results and leave it up to the lessons learned. I just, there isn't like there isn't like the journal of the S-STEM. Where the scope of the journal is to talk about the S-STEM. So when you get a lot of results that were based upon S-STEMs, especially because a lot of these publications are older, it is a social science. It is very much a social science publication. And in the S-STEM, especially depending on which type of S-STEM you have, how longitudinal it is. Like for instance, because we're funding our students for all 4 years, we only have 18 students. And not all of the 18 students stay for the full year. So your end value gets very unreliable. But as Kavita said, our end values with the way our numbers have panned out would never fly in a standard journal. But qualitatively, if you don't try to be too statistically correct, there is qualitative lessons learned that our like PIs and co-PIs are thinking about doing, again, in blog form, presenting at the different ASSS. One thing I would like to see, and I think Catherine Wright is here from Boise State University. We met at the ASSS, and I got to follow up with the program director for the S-STEM, because one of the things that they asked is, could we come up with a peer mentoring? Basically, anybody who gets their first S-STEM grant, is there a way the NSF could try to start a pairing with them and willing people who are already well into their first S-STEM or on their second S-STEM? Could they kind of be a peer mentor for that first year for new S-STEM PIs to kind of navigate these things? And I feel like it's just so hard to kind of get that, what did you learn from your S-STEM to other people trying to do an S-STEM or trying to implement these programs? Because one of the problems with a lot of the stuff we're implementing, and I'll end here, is like, well, how would I implement this at my university? It's like, well, step 1, get a company to give you an endowment so that you can give like 20 students $5,000 grants every single year. That'll be step one. And then once you have all that money, then you can start doing these, processes. Because a huge thing that we have with the S-STEM is a scholarship. We know money is a huge barrier for low-income students getting a degree. Everything else we're generating just helps. But the second for a lot of people, this would be a study I would never want to do, right? Is like do everything, to have two cohorts, one where you gave them no money and one where you just gave them the interventions and see how much one does over the other one. And I would bet that there might even be something on that out there, but it's just that the lessons learned from an S-STEM is hard when it's mainly a scholarship. So sure, you do other things to help, but what really helps is money. And knowing that they don't have to get another job and all these other things. But for people who are trying to do an S-STEM, certainly it would be great if we could find a way of getting those lessons learned out there. I would have loved some of them. Oh, there you go, ASE peer. Thank you, Dave.
I've seen some of the publications in ASC. Thanks, Dave. The other thing is also, Brandon, that last year, along with the REC, NSF funded 5 hubs, S-STEM hubs, and some of these hubs actually are looking into longitudinal data. Some of them are actually, I think one of them is doing a meta-analysis across all the S-STEMs funded to date, so that they have a larger sample size and they're doing both qualitative and quantitative mixed method studies. So all of us are really eagerly waiting for some initial results to see what's happening, especially in terms of the interventions, either correlational, mostly correlational. I would be very surprised if they are really causational studies at this point.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I do have a question for you, Brandon, just something to share a little bit more context on. You talked a little bit about your experience with working with parents and families, or dealing with parents and families. I thought there might be some good lessons there for you to share.
Yeah, lessons. Yeah, with the S-STEM, one of the biggest challenges that I found, and I've definitely bounced. We talked to Kavita about this, going back to like the evaluator relationship, is sometimes dealing with parents, you don't want to just give the student your opinion, because it's a very difficult place. We have had students that whose parents basically said, hey, I got laid off, you need to quit the S-STEM program or that, and you need to come home right now. Or, hey, your sister's being really, really difficult and you used to be around to babysit her. I can't deal with it. You need to come back. Those kinds of things. And it's like, they come to you like, oh, I'm really trying to do this, but I'm going home every weekend to babysit my sister, 30 minutes away, 40 minutes away. And what should I do? It's hurting my grades. And these are these difficult conversations you have to have, which is like, we all love our families, but do you feel like your family's taking advantage of you? Do you feel like they have your best interest at heart, or do you think that they're just trying to have their best interest at heart? Do you have what my mom, and I say this in more of a joking way, but kind of the whole, I carried you for 9 months and gave birth to you, so now I have a lifetime debt because of that kind of a thing. And you don't want to get into, that's a tough one for you as a PI. So you try to just offer both sides of it. But it is very difficult. And what I always try to get the students to come to their own understanding, which is, what is the relationship you want to maintain with your parents? Do you feel like your parents, have your best interest at heart? Are they just trying to make life easier for themselves? Is it fair to you? Like, try to take a step back, talk to other peers, see how other people are dealing with this. But yeah, when you've got parents that are unsupportive, it can be very difficult. We had the one scholar whose parent kept telling everyone every time she'd get a C+ in a course, well, that's because you're not smart enough to be a STEM major. And it's just like, well, how do you? It's like, well, stop going back home to that. You kind of want to say, it's like, you got to make sure that you're with your friends. Make sure that you try to get yourself towards the positive things. But yeah, the parents can be really difficult sometimes. The ones that are less than supportive.
So that obviously had some implications on the program, right? Challenges that you faced. Kavita, how did that affect you and your role?
It's actually interesting because as an evaluator, again, we don't impose our opinions, right? It's interesting because one of the other sites, it was interesting because the scholarship amount, the PIs shared the scholarship amounts that were given out to the scholars. And I was just kind of tracking in terms of what's happening in terms of, because S-STEM is the last dollar scholarship, I was very surprised to see that a certain scholars, they had a large amount of scholarship in the first year, and then it completely almost tapered off. So I was happy for them that, okay, fine, they're doing pretty well financially, and maybe they don't need that amount of money. So when I inquired the PI and I asked, like, why do you think that's what's going on with this particular scholar? They said that, well, they didn't really require that much money to begin with. And they just needed a little bit of stopgap arrangement. And we were able to fill that. And luckily, they were able to come off of their part-time job. So we are glad that the S-STEM scholarship was able to fill that gap. But it doesn't happen that often because when we ask the scholars, you have a part-time job, and we are noticing that your grades are slipping, right? Your GPA, and then you get an early alert from the PI saying that, hey, what's going on? Why are your grades from C- and going into D, and you are planning to drop out? I think we have been able to provide that information right away to the PIs because we do a fall survey and a spring survey, and we do a focus group with some of the cases, and we get information. So we are able to feed that back immediately to the PIs. And if they have to take any action, if they have to get in touch with these scholars, it is very helpful. In only one instance we've had where the parent actually filled out the survey on behalf of the scholar. It was extremely interesting. We had sent the link to the scholar, but the parent actually said that I am the parent of this particular scholar, and here are my concerns. I want my child to start working and support my family. So we just cannot have this X amount of money because it's not enough for a family. So that was a very big thing. And I immediately got in touch with the PI, and the follow-up was that the PI was able to convince the student to stay in the program, finish up, transfer into another university. And they made sure that when they were transferred into the university, a 4-year institution, they actually got another full ride scholarship. So we are glad that we were able to identify that when we did, and then make sure that it actually had a mitigation plan in place.
Wow, thank you both for sharing. Definitely shows how some of those, I guess, those surprises that come in can affect ultimately both partners in this relationship.
So evaluation-wise, as Shelley, you're an evaluator, and you know this, that's why formative assessment and evaluation is so important. You're not waiting until the end of the year to give that information back to the PIs or the co-PIs, because they're also looking at us, they're looking to us to see, hey, what are you finding? You did a focus group. So it doesn't have to be a full-fledged report. It could just be a few bullet points. Everything is great. Or we are noticing this particular scholar is really struggling with homelessness. We had one institution where the scholars were really struggling towards Thanksgiving and towards Christmas. They were just breaking down. And what was it that was really bothering them? So the PI could intervene.
Yeah, if I can chime in as well, it doesn't even have to be written. Formative assessment can covers the duration of your relationship in the grant. And so even during your meetings and conversations, as you're analyzing data and so on, I've been known to just say, hey, this looks odd. Why? What's going on? Is there a story here that we need to unravel? And that leads to, further questioning with the project and leads to some sort of intervention. So that in of itself is also valuable for the program.
Okay. Yep.
That theme of communication is strong. And yes, as an evaluator, like that's ringing in my head too. What are the takeaways that you want for participants to leave knowing, whether it's evaluator to PI, evaluator to evaluator, vice versa? What is it that you would want for people to leave with? You've already shared a lot. Any other thoughts?
I mean, if I were to sum this up very quickly, it would, and talking with Kavita, it's the, like you said, the communication. But I would say the general theme is the PI should not think of the evaluators as this thing that the S-STEM requires. Like it shouldn't be seen as like, oh damn, there goes 10% of my budget because the S-STEM needs it. So I'm just gonna find somebody. If they don't go externally and it's internal, like make sure, because I have talked to some PIs where it's like the evaluator was internal and doesn't do as much as external. So making sure that if it's an internal evaluator, that they are as kind of in it, you know, as you would expect an evaluator to be. Because I think that goes both ways, whether it's to the evaluator or how a PI views evaluation, is it really shouldn't be this, damn it, I have to pay somebody all this money that I could be paying myself or somebody else to do evaluation kind of a thing. It's like, well, of course we're gonna, you know, publish, so that should be evaluate or something along those lines. Is really these S-STEM grants are beasts. They are just beasts with so many different facets. And the evaluator is really like your little guiding star who sees everything from above, who doesn't accept all of the BS that you've learned to accept at your institution, who can tell you, Brandon, you know, your purchasing department is the worst purchasing department that I've ever dealt with in my life. And then that starts to make me realize, oh, we just thought that all purchasing departments sucks. It's great to know that ours is much worse than all the other ones, because then it can help you with other things that you're doing in purchasing to realize, oh, so there's really some problems here that aren't just, that's how all colleges behave. And then in other cases, it can also give you that where you're struggling, you're like, Kavita, you would not believe what my institutions, Brandon, that's the same at every institution. And that when you're already dealing with all of the strains of an S-STEM, having that, it's worth the money that I should be paying Kavita and eventually one day she'll get. But it's totally, sorry, I had to throw one more of those little jokes in there, Kavita. We have to laugh at it, otherwise we'll cry. But the whole point is that it is, when I first saw the word evaluator, that was my mindset. It was, why do I have to have an evaluator? You know, this seemed, but it's like, I couldn't imagine my S-STEM project being half as successful if I didn't have Kavita kind of monthly and that kind of back and forth. So respect the evaluation process, realize its importance, and make sure when you choose an evaluator that you treat it as important as any other aspect of the project.
I'm going to go off camera and cry a little bit, Brandon. It goes both ways, right? I mean, it's communication is a two-way, you know, it's absolutely two-way. It's a pleasure to work with Brandon, as it is a pleasure to work with some of the other PIs who have really kindly joined today. And I see Melissa. Melissa is one of the best PIs. So if anyone is looking to collaborate, Melissa is here at Mesa College in Arizona. We had Jeff also join us, and we have Trisha from the College of the Canyon, some of the really, really good PIs who are on it. They're like, there are some issues going on, we need to talk, we need to chat. It doesn't have to be a formal meetings. As Brandon said, sometimes he just sends me an email, say that, you know, let's just talk for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just get this off. So it really helps to be formal, informal, structured, unstructured, anything to really move forward. And again, just keeping that in focus, that we are here to serve the scholars. It's about the scholars, not about us.
Awesome. Very well said. Any other questions? Any questions from the participants? We are going to open it up for you for a last call, if you will. Okay. And if not, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Nina.
So Move to the next slide, please, Jamila. That would be great. So I know sometimes this, you've got to listen to stories coming in from Westchester. Brandon and Kavita, thank you again for sharing that. And I know sometimes they were kind of going into areas that you may feel uncomfortable sharing. So there's other ways to do that and kind of get some of those ideas. And one of which is the form here that we have highlighted, and you can use either the URL or the QR code available. And next slide, please. And as mentioned before, we're going to bring all of these together and create a resource and posted it into the evaluation and research resource section of the website. And so hopefully as time goes by, we'll have enough of these types of things archived and documented and available for all of you. And see, next slide, please. Before we go though, can't help but be an evaluator. So of course, there's going to be a survey at the end. And as you know, what gets measured gets done. And as you can see, we do use data. So this, this little conversation we're having stems from the data that you provide us. So we like to hear more, and so that we can provide this type of service for you. So please feel free to do that. And again, want to open it up to the remaining time. We had this for 75 minutes with another 15 minutes extra for anyone who wants some one-on-one, some TA, and if it's just an opportunity to commiserate and maybe share some some lessons learned and maybe find some other ways to go about some of the things that you're dealing with, this is an opportunity to do so without it being recorded. So we open up that format as well. So with that, want to again thank Brandon and Kavita for presenting their perspectives on the PI Evaluator engagement collaboration. And we truly appreciate our colleagues, Tara, Jamila, and Rachel, for their technical assistance. If you notice, you probably don't see it, but there's a lot of exchanges going on among us in the chat. And we really want to thank you all for being here. Again, this is an avenue that we want to create and establish and become fruitful. I know this is only our second time doing this, but we hope that, I think, as we get to know one another, that we'll have more fruitful exchanges in the process. And of course, if there are topics that you want us to address, we've kind of noted the ones that you mentioned to us through the survey, but if there are any others, please share that with us, because we'd love to hear from you. And with that, we're going to stick around. We're going to cut off our recording here